Please jump up into the microphones. I imagine you're all energized right now.
Trish is afraid to sit next to me. I don't bite. Come sit next to me.
So I'm looking at our time clock, seeing if this is how much time we're going to have for questions. Is this 25 minutes? Is that, yeah?
You got it.
30 minutes. Wow, look at that. We have 30 minutes for questions. So there's lots of time to have discussion. And you know, Tricia, any thoughts on Thomas's talk? Thomas, any thoughts on Tricia's talk as we get everyone warmed up to come to the microphone?
I have a thought on yours talk. Okay. I want to make the hero notebook. I don't know what I have to do. You don't remember the hero notebook?
Oh, yeah.
It feels like 16 years ago. Remember when she mentioned the hero notebook?
Yeah.
I want to be in that hero notebook.
What's the criteria?
Yeah.
I'll get back to you.
You have to inspire me. So far you're on the right track. All right, let's start over here.
Hi, my name is Cynthia. I'm from the Virginia Hospital Center. I'm actually working with the oncology patients. And then a lot of times what happens is oncology patients, they're actually living longer these days. And they do having a disability. So they're having a hard time to find the food. They're having an issue with the food insecure. And also hospital produce of the massive the food waste. They serving the patients, but they wasting the food. And then also plus the grocery store who actually throwing out the food a lot. So how we gonna be resolving to the two kind of issues, before hands of the, food waste?
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you for that question. Number one, where we start is food cannot be wasted. So, chef at Virginia Hospital, you better come up with another solution. You have to do something with that food. Either we're going to pare down the buffet earlier in the night, but you cannot take food and discard it. All right? At the very minimum, we have to find a 501c3 to partner with to take food at the end of the day, or we compost it. One of the things I didn't talk about is we have a massive donation program at Baldor. We donated 2 million pounds of food last year for the food insecure. And one of the things I'm committed to is keeping that food in Hunts Point or in the Bronx to the best extent possible. We don't handcuff our partners. But we've had people request from us to send it to Westchester or to New Jersey. And I'm like, as long as we have food insecure people here, why would we move food there? We need to take responsibility for those people and make sure they have food. As long as we're putting tomatoes back in a field from a co-packing facility 150 miles away from New York City, shame on us. We need to feed those people. And food is their medicine. I happen to have a son. He was diagnosed with brain cancer. He just got a 5-year clear 2 weeks ago Tuesday from Yale University that he's cancer-free. And my wife, even before this, was really cautious about what we fed him. But you're absolutely right. The food options for kids in the hospital, and he has spent years in the hospital, weren't great. And we need to change that. Those are the people that absolutely should have healthy food.
So I might have misunderstood something, but were you talking about the residents at the hospital? The students?
No, I'm actually...
You are.
I am a registered dietitian. So I work with oncology patients, but some of the patients come back with food insecure.
Yeah.
And also in hospital, in bed, they serving the food.
Right,
So when I
right.
volunteer to the food nutrition service, they wade into the food waste and then dump into the dumpster.
Got it.
So I try to come up with how we gonna be connected to the not food waste and then feed the food insecure people.
And I'll just mention to the group, it's worth mentioning, a lot of times a parent has to stop working. My wife has taken care of she stopped working. She had to take care of our son. We were okay financially, but there's plenty of couples where one of them has to stop working, and that makes the family food insecure. Because guess what they make a priority? Taking care of that child. So we need to accept, we think about the food insecure as somebody we see on the street and say, oh, I can identify that guy's clearly food insecure. But how about the widow who lost her husband and is totally depressed and needs some love? And we have extra food we're not going to eat. Let's go down the street, knock on the door and say, Mrs. Smith, we have some extra food. Can I share it with you? She's going to be thrilled. It's the love you're sharing that's going to bring her around to realize, hey, there is a reason for living. And food will make that happen. Thank you for that. It was a great question.
I'm wondering about the regulatory aspects of transferring food from restaurants or grocery stores or farms to people that are in need. Are you familiar with that, with your experience? And I know there's a lot of red tape. So how do we get around it? How do we...
Please about it, but I'll answer the question. The Good Samaritan law protects you. You have to donate the food to a 501c3. And so we can make sure that whoever's taking that food from either a food service institution or a wholesaler or Baldor, that we're putting it into the hands of another organization that's going to treat that food responsibly, make sure it's heated properly, make sure it's refrigerated properly, and then get it into the hands of the food insecure. You are absolutely protected by the Good Samaritan law. In fact, at a recent meeting, we asked the question, has anybody ever gotten sick from donated food? Is there a case of somebody dying, God forbid? Not one. So there's more people in need of that food than there is any risks in getting it to them, but use a 501c3 and make sure that it's handled properly. And you are protected. But there is a lot of misinformation that, I can't donate that food because it's not safe. That's not true.
Becca Jablonski. So 2 points. One is that I think the example of Baldor's, and there's so many others, J. King's, there's just really great examples of, I think, why we need to do a better job utilizing existing infrastructure rather than always sort of try to leverage federal dollars to build food hubs, for example, right? That we're not doing enough with existing assets. But my other point, just in getting back to the theme of today, I think talking about trade-offs, is that I think that there are maybe some trade-offs that we're not talking about here, right? I think that the work you're doing is fantastic, obviously. But one, and I left New York about 5 years ago now, but when you're talking about that waste, most of that waste, as I understand it, is actually going to waste treatment facilities in upstate New York and is an economic driver for rural communities. I'm not saying that's what we want to be our economic driver, but it is. And so we need to think about not just improving brownfields, but how we're going to replace that sort of economic development opportunity in rural places. And two, and this is not something I know anything about, but my assumption would be that actually having some of that biodigestible, I don't know if I'm using the right term, right, waste as a component of our overall waste is probably important or has some pretty dramatic implications on what actually happens in those waste treatment facilities. So.
Waste is not my area.
So thank you for that. That was great.
Someone will ask me a question.
Yeah, that's really amazing. Thank you, Becca, for that. So first, I'd like to say that if it's being used, I said before, food to energy, then create a digestate that gets used, I'm all about that. I love anaerobic digestion, the idea of capturing energy from that food. Of course, the first thing we want to do is source reduce. That should be the number one goal. But if we have a product, let's do something responsible with it. And yes, there's a lot of hesitancy on the part of investors to invest in anaerobic digestion because they fear that we're going to become much more efficient in using our sparks, right? So there is that fear. That's a good fear. But we want to make sure that whatever our solution is, it is the optimal solution. And in my mind, if it's feeding humans first, that's the best solution. That's the best solution. Did I answer your question? Second part. There was a second part. No, we're good? We're good. Okay.
Okay. I didn't see who is
She
up.
was here
Okay.
before I was. Hi, Christy Reimers with Conagra Brands. And nutrition is my background, so my question may be naive. So we've talked a lot about urban food systems, regional food systems, local. But the food system that I'm surrounded in the Midwest is the corn and soy being fed to livestock. How do we connect the dots between these smaller food systems and that food system, which it seems is kind of the villain, or what in fact is driving monoculture and a lot of the issues? I'm just wondering how some of these smaller issues connect to changing that larger food system.
Well, I think can you hear me? It's hard to tell if it's working right. I think one of the first steps is some of the research done on regional food systems that is not just about local. In some places, the local product isn't particularly edible by humans, or at least not in the short term or directly. So I think thinking regionally, thinking about depending on where you are, local or regional looks different. And one of the things Kate has always said is that regions are nested in regions, and there's not a regional food system or a food system overall necessarily. It's all a bunch of food systems. I also think that opportunities and options for diversification, that's something I do for the farmers themselves to consider, and the folks who are buying food there. Is there something else you want from your local food system there in that region? And we've seen, for instance, that sometimes the children of those commodity farmers coming home are looking for ways to get more premium income, more margin from their farming. And if that farm is now going to support the kids and their two families or whatever, they may decide to take a piece of it and put it into fruits and vegetables or some sort of regenerative livestock or something else like that. So I think thinking creatively about diversifying a region, diversifying a family's income, a farm or firm's income is a way to bridge that gap towards local, regional, and the things we're talking about here today. But I also think when you're thinking regionally, often people have been thinking of local food systems as very small, certain definitions of what sustainable ag is, and really, okay, here's an example. When we're talking about regional food systems partnership grants, we're thinking about what would make someone obviously ready as a partnership. And one of the things is not just looking at the partners that you think are in your local food system movement, but also looking at the distributors that are out there. You need partners to be able, and some of them are in a conventional supply chain or a conventional commodity, but they're part of feeding the people in that region. And so keeping them isolated and separate doesn't make sense if we're having a systems approach.
Oh, in that case, I'll go ahead and say what I need to say. And I suspect what I am thinking is going through the minds of many people in the audience. I really love what you're doing at Baldur. I fully support what you're saying and making sure that waste is not considered, or food is not considered waste. I think that needs to become a mantra for many of us. But another mantra that I would really like to see embedded in our cultural narrative is that food and nutrition are human rights. And it always bothers me a little bit when the discussion of waste goes immediately into a discussion of feeding hungry people, because I think that tends to divert attention away from all the other things that we need to be doing as a society in order to ensure that food and nutrition as human rights are truly realized for all of us. So I would love to see those things also become part of our mantra.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think to take it one step further, what I'm thinking about these days, we have 26 pallet positions on a tractor trailer coming from California to New York. Could we take 24 pallet positions, deliberately bring in 2 pallet positions for U.S. Food Rescue or for Food Bank of New York, so that they're not stumbling on what they get from Baldur, but rather we're deliberate about what we're bringing in to purposefully feed the food insecure in our community. I'm 100% with you.
And that would certainly help to get at nutrition, which is recognized as a human right as well as food itself. The issue in providing food that would otherwise be wasted to meet the needs of food insecure people is that it's not necessarily what they need nutritionally, what they need to meet their basic nutritional profile. The other thing that we aren't talking about much in this food waste discussion is the whole issue of overproduction, that we are producing way too much food in this country. I come from Vermont, and we have a huge problem in Vermont with overproduction of milk. So milk prices are so low that farmers are going out of business right and left. They cannot sustain their livelihoods. And unless we can get production aligned with what we really need to feed people in this country, we will continue to keep wasting it.
I think one of the questions there, thank you for that. I think one of the questions there goes back to the options and opportunities and what are we offering in terms of a lot of these food systems funding programs at USDA throughout this list could be used to explore what's possible, what's feasible in a region that isn't currently being grown, that could replace something that's being overproduced or that's causing failures because there's not a market for it. So exploring what works in those regions, climate-wise, values-wise, culture-wise, what is a good alternative for people whose business model is no longer working and they're seeing the writing on the wall for that. So I encourage you to think about using them in that way.
In response, an array of alternatives. Suddenly, people in Vermont are jumping on hemp, but we're just not going to make it with everybody producing hemp, just like we're not making it with everybody producing way too much milk.
And let's put our shoes, get in the farmer's shoes for a second. When you plant a seed in June and are hoping for a yield in September, it's very difficult to understand what exactly that yield is going to be. When I was listening to the conversation about the Cosmic Crisp apple, what occurred to me was, what happened to the farmers, was it 3 years ago or 4 years ago with the fires in Washington State that got decimated? What happened to them? Oh my gosh, when I heard 22 years to rebuild all those trees, what happened to those poor farmers? Right? I think we also have to be mindful of all of the things that can happen between, even the storm you had just rolled through here, that probably decimated some farms along the way. That hail, I was in Baltimore yesterday when it hit Baltimore. It was unbelievable. But if that hit a farm, there goes the farmer's livelihood for the year, folks. It's August. How do you predict, and that's one of the reasons why we have so much overproduction. And oftentimes in certain areas, if they had good temperatures, we get good yields. But then we have to be flexible enough to do something with that food and deliberate. Hey, Tom.
I would like to learn a little bit more so I can understand about the regional farm program grants on that. So it just dawned on me that the two of you are sitting there side by side, and you know something about the grants and you know something about food. So you've got Baldor producing tremendous amounts of cut produce in a facility that's cold, right? It's kept cold, and all the chopped bits are cold. You also have taken in a lot of tomatoes from New York farmers, thousands and thousands of pounds, and you have some imperfects coming in now. So my question, a scenario, what would the conversation sound like if Baldor, which is a donor in many respects of opportunities, went to the USDA and had a discussion about Baldor supporting massive amounts of food, not going into chefs, but maybe going into a very significant and large value-added food production company?
Well, you will have to compete with everyone else. So we've gotten lots of questions about how people can get in before the competition process. But I will say that what we hope to see in the Regional Food Systems Partnership grants applications are not just food policy councils, although they can partner and be an applicant, not just local, state, federal, tribal governments, but also businesses, also farmers, also health, nutrition professionals. We want to see a partnership that is diverse enough that it has the ideas of someone like Tom, and it has the ideas of the nutritionists in the room and the other kinds of research in the room, so that we can say, these people are really looking at the problem critically in a creative way, and they're going to find some solutions, and they're equipped to know what their surrounding situation is. They're going to know that Baldor's facility is there and that they have these scraps available because they've already done Sparks. Yes, Sparks. I'll get there. I think I might have said food waste together a couple times too. I'm sorry. But anyway, so that we want partnerships that are either, we will likely have sort of nascent partnership first phase grants and second phase grants. But by the time anyone's coming to us for that second phase, we will hope that they know that this is in their community, or that they know there's a meat processing facility that's had a feasibility study. What we don't want is for people to come to us who haven't yet done that, and they're doing a feasibility study for a meat processing plant, and there's already 2 more in their community, and they're going to be requiring that same supply and that same demand is available for those to be viable entities. So we want connections. So please partner with whoever's in your regional as you perceive your region to be.
Promise.
Yeah, sort of Jean Halloran from Consumer Reports. It's sort of related to this. I've been thinking as you were speaking, you're not the only food distributor in New York City, and it made me wonder, what the other food distributors think of what you're doing and whether they thought to copy it. Some of what you're doing is just because you think it's crazy not to, but some of it is also, selling carrot peelings for 30 cents a pound make a little money from that. So kind of wondering about the rest of the industry and your perceptions of them.
I appreciate that question. I think we're still very much ahead of our competition. I think about sustainability as a journey. I'm brave enough to look backwards and say, what did we do yesterday? That wasn't so great. Let's do better today. That's what's got us to this point. I'm an open book. I've had competition call. I can talk about anything. I mean, they come to conferences like this, and I'm trying to encourage that sort of thinking. We have an inclination, a proclivity to want to waste. I just can't, I can't describe it. It doesn't make any sense to me. But Professor Miller and I were talking about this over lunch a little bit. How in the Nordic countries, as people get older, they start to give away their assets so that when they pass, everything's given away. That's kind of cool. Share, right? We have this idea like it's mine, and instead of me sharing it, I'm just going to dispose of it. That's the cultural shift we need. And the second part of it is, I look at food matter that people choose not to eat as gold. Why would we throw gold away? But that transformation in culture is something we need to work on collectively. Because right now, it's perfectly acceptable to waste those products. And that's what has to change. And even for those distributors, they think this is our business model, and that gets sent to landfill. It's just the way it is. I can't figure it out. It doesn't make any sense to me. But I think there's a movement. I've never been involved with something with momentum like this has.
And you said something about government regulation. Do you see any role for government to kind of push things along?
Love to see. I don't think it's legal to throw a paint can in your garbage. Is it anywhere in the country? I know it's not in New York. You can't throw an empty paint can in garbage. There's like one day a year, you bring it to the town and they do something with it, right? Why do we allow food to be commingled with the waste stream? We should not allow it. 100% of food should be that we choose not to eat should be captured for composting. Period. That's the regulation I'm talking about.
And there are models for that.
There are.
I moved to Washington from Washington State, and in Seattle, restaurants, businesses, homes all had compost pickup.
Yeah, it's happening. It is definitely happening. And on the commercial side in New York, now it is regulation. But we were ahead of it for different reasons, so it's definitely, the momentum's there. Thank you for that. That was a great question.
Chris Peters, Tufts University. I have a question that's mostly aimed at Tricia, and it was generated by looking at that figure you had with the whole panoply of different grant programs. And what I'm wondering is, do you have an example of a place or a group of people that have really leveraged this diverse range of grants to try to put together a lot of resources to solve a big problem in a place? And if not, how might you go about doing that?
Is it cheating to say my own work in Washington State? No, it is. But I just don't know. I think we need to develop more, dare I say, case studies. But I do think they're useful to see who's used different pieces. I know, I'm trying to think of an example, but instead I'm going to give you more of a theoretical one, if that's okay. So we have the grants that I talked about here that can help you with farmers markets or other direct-to-consumer markets and food hubs or distribution solutions. Businesses can be part of that. It doesn't have to be a nonprofit food hub or anything like that. Beginning farmer rancher grants and 2501 grants, which are for targeted underserved groups to help them access USDA programs and training about farming. So there's how to farm. There are SARE grants that are professional development for ways of farming. There are the Sustainable Ag Systems grants that someone referenced earlier this morning that come out of NIFA. I think that they're hopefully, again, something that a partnership would do. And I would say Sacramento Area Council of Governments has maybe done some of this. Those kinds of regional thinking is the best way to do it because you need CDC We used to use CDC funds to do a lot of food systems work in Washington State. We were also using specialty crop block grants, which USDA gives to the states, and they're for produce and other specialty crop. It's about competitiveness, but we were using it to do food safety training for farmers, to help them access markets, which I was a farm-to-school person. And I knew that I needed to train the farmers, and I needed to get them to meet the auditors, because the auditors needed to understand the food safety practices that they were used to seeing might not work on a more rustic farm or a very small farm. So that helping them, one, reduce the anxiety of dealing with each other, but two, see what's feasible within the standard on a farm like this compared to a farm like that. So we were using specialty crop block funds for that. We were using CDC funds to work with school districts themselves on recipe development, focus groups on food safety and handling. We used a weird little public health grant from Astapend. Are they still called that? The state and territorial directors of public health or something. Anyway, to do salad bar publication that was designed to teach food service about safe salad bar handling of fresh produce. But honestly, that's not what it was designed for. It was secretly designed to tell health departments at the county level that it was okay to use farm fresh produce in schools on salad bars, because they were dinging people for the fact that they were buying from farms and not from an approved source, which is a term that doesn't actually mean what people think it means. So we were trying to use different funding sources to do creative things that would help the whole system move forward. So I guess I don't have an example of a place that's done it, but I do think it's a really smart way to do it. What I do caution against is grant chasing. Another thing that I think is important, we ran a state program on grants for 2 years, so I've given this a lot of thought. We had a strategic plan. I wasn't willing to change our strategic plan. We knew what our system needed to do to get us to where we were with markets for farmers and food for kids and all of that. So rather than changing this big thing, I would look at grants and figure out which piece of that arc it could fund. So it could seem piecemeal and like you're chasing things, but you can do it within your overall goals. And that's the thing I really encourage regions, policy councils, and other sort of groups to consider. Great.
Hi, I'm Tim Torma. I work at EPA. Until 15 minutes ago, I worked on food waste, but now I work on sparks. Wanted to thank Tom for showing our food waste hierarchy about going from the more preferential to the least preferential things to do with excess food. And I think I would be a bad bureaucrat if I did not mention, for anybody here who doesn't know it, that we EPA created an excess food opportunity map using GIS and other data, trying to match people with extra food with those 501c3 type organizations that can accept it, so that people don't have to wonder, where can I take all this food? That tool should help them. But I do have a question, or maybe it's an observation. Tom, you said that in 2016 at the ReFed meeting, you stood up and said, we're going to go 100% nothing to landfill. And that indeed that it's crazy for us as a society, or for Baldor as a business, to take an asset and throw it in the trash. Like, it is crazy. What were you doing before 2016? And part of my point is that exposure to how crazy it is helps people get to where you.
I appreciate that question. So we had a waste hauler at the time who informed us that 100% of the food was at the transfer station, was transferred to compost, and the balance the recyclables would be taken out, and then it would be sorted there. I saw the transfer station. That might have been happening, but it wasn't good enough for me. I needed to be able to audit it, understand it, know it. Right now, we have those 900-pound totes that feed animals. We extract some of the food in the production process, like the carrot peel, and we'll sell it to a company to make a carrot cake cookie. The third solution is all of the remaining food coming from production, which is about 20,000 pounds a day, goes into a container that's picked up every morning at 2 a.m. It goes 15 miles away to a company called Willenta Feed, where it is converted into a pellet to feed poultry. I love that question because, like I said, you got to be brave enough to look back and say, well, this is so great. The reason why the Willenta solution is great is because it was close. We had other solutions before that. Some of you may know that we used to make a dried vegetable blend that was really all the rage. Magazines were picking up on it. The problem was the dehydration company was so far away, I couldn't live with the CO2 release of the trucks bringing this food product to dehydrate it. One day, I'm going to mention this, and some entrepreneur is going to create a dehydration plant in Hunts Point and take our food and make the dried vegetable blend. But I can't solve our sustainability issues and create others for you and feel good about my solution. So all of our solutions have to fit into a bigger plan. That's sort of the way we've seen it. So thank you for that. And I'm happy that you're going to change it from food waste hierarchy and change the language on that. That's very kind of you.
Hi, Helen Jensen from Iowa State. I've appreciated this discussion, and I think it's really important. So I don't want to distract from that need that we have to look more carefully at the way we're handling waste. I do see issues of a scale problem, that you can handle food in California, food production in California differently than one might in a smaller location. And maybe it gets to some of the regional or the local food systems issues. There was a case several years ago of an outbreak of trichinella, I believe, in London, and it came with recycling of waste of food from restaurants. So I'm wondering, we've got a number of issues here in scale and safety. I'm wondering if you see any need for types of research that would help in what you've learned either at the local regional or in the scale at which you operate, that would make it more efficient, make it safer. Is it the development of products for animal feed? Is it development of products or streaming in the production process that could separate what can go into human foods? Any comments along those lines? Appreciate it.
I think that's a great point. And so the solution for Baldor is unique to Baldor. There's no question about it. Scalability becomes a question. At my home, food is never commingled with anything that's going out in the garbage, ever. Although I'm not home yesterday, so I'll have to make sure when I get back home that my children and my wife were compliant. But we have this beautiful composting facility in the backyard. There's no odor. We create this unbelievable soil that I use throughout the garden. That's the solution that works for my home. But I think the important messaging here is, for your organization, how can you manage your food matter responsibly? So there's this wonderful opportunity. You may have heard how about a Food for All? Elise, have you heard of Food for All, the company? Okay, phenomenal. What Food for All is doing is taking the mystery out of moving it from this location, moving it here to feed Food Insecure. You're going to love this. When a restaurant closes at 9:30, 10 o'clock down here, things close relatively early, but not too early. Then the food gets picked up and is brought to some donation center, and maybe it's going to feed somebody after it's reheated 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. We're not Spanish. We don't eat at 12 o'clock at night, right? There are communities that eat that late, but we don't. So we're missing our market, right? Those folks want to eat at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock like we do. Food for All is an app. You go on the app and you're in a particular community, and it'll show you everything in that community, everything in the different restaurants that are on the Food for All app that's available at about half the price. The beautiful part about it is you buy it. When you go to the store to pick it up, no one is going to know that you were food insecure or that you paid half price. All they're going to say is, hey, Claire, here's your bag, and you go home and eat your food, or you eat it there. It's a way of the restaurant moving the food out from the restaurant. Bakeries are doing it now. It is so exciting to me. Why? We treat the community with respect. We say we have food for you. We're going to move it over there, and you have to eat it in the soup kitchen. There's nothing wrong with soup kitchens, but you get my point. You can eat it right here. And now we have a deliberate way of managing that food. So for a smaller restaurant, that works really well. So every solution is going to be unique. We have to be willing to look at it and say, what's going to work for this organization? But what we can't do is squander those assets and decide that a landfill is the appropriate solution. No way.
I have just a thought on the food safety side of that, which is that you're treating it like food all the way through.
All the way through.
So you're handling it as food. You're not handling it as waste. And
Right.
ideally, you are thinking through food safety considerations the way you would in a restaurant. Absolutely. Or the way you would in a food processing plant. And you're doing fresh cuts already. So
That's
you're
right.
already thinking of things in that. So I think as long as you're using the systems that you would need to be using as a processor or a farmer or a restaurant.
Absolutely.
I don't see any additional.
For Baldor, food safety is absolutely number one. And for any organization that's going to feed people, it has to be. So it's a great point.
Excellent. So with that, we have 35 seconds left. So maybe you want to
use one or
the
two of them
30
because I
seconds.
forgot to say things.
Yes.
We're having a direct marketing summit outside of Chicago, October 7th through 9th, which USDA is coordinating with Farmers Market Coalition and several others. It's not just about farmers markets. I think it might be interesting to folks. That's on localfoodeconomics.com if you want more information about that. And also, all these grants I'm talking about, we need reviewers who get it, who understand food systems, who understand regional approaches. So please, come to me. I'll give you a card, or I'll give you the right way to sign up to be a reviewer. Thanks.
Just one more comment from me. So this is what I learned today. We are here today to liberate the world from an unsustainable food system, as GHG must peak in 2020. Hello, folks. That's 5 months. We have to work with the complexity of who we are as a people. Ask any farmer. 75% of farmers made the changes to their production as a result of what they learned participating in farmers markets. Right, Becca? This is why we need to employ transdisciplinary science to solve these issues. That is to consider soil, water, seed, human capital, etc., which includes a transboundary footprint. I had to use that, sorry. I don't know really what it means, but I used it. Sustainable packaging simply does not exist. Please, make something happen there, Claire. I want to help you with that so badly. Public service announcement, you can take a drone to participate in the UN Sustainable Food System Multi-Stakeholder Committee. That's not a joke. You have a reading assignment, The Great Mind Shift by Gopal, so please read that. Tomorrow you will learn more about waste reduction strategies from experts in the field, including my friend Steve Finn here, as well as how to work to impact our food insecure system and feed more people in need. I'm going to make a production claim. You designed a valuable and impactful conversation today around creating a sustainable food system. Sylvia Rowe and all the committee members, staff, volunteers, and presenters, and all the participants did an unbelievable job. And we have cosmic, crisp cosmos waiting for us at the bar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.